Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I didn't really cover this in my previous video, but I wanted to touch base on the outrage surrounding the assumptions being made in regards to Blizzard deleting downvotes on the trailers for Diablo Immortal, and have a bit of a frank discussion about all of it for a moment. This will not be a facts then opinion style video, but it will be more reason based. No one will be getting attacked here, nor will anyone being called out. I will be referencing a fellow YouTuber, Yongya, quite a bit, but I'm citing one of his videos as a case example of what I'm talking about here, but I'm not directly attempting to attack him, so please bear that in mind. My purpose for recording this is to hopefully provide a little bit of perspective about the whole situation and possibly some context as well. You see, with so many shady actions in the games industry, particularly within the sphere of the AAA games industry, it's become all too common to have people assume the absolute worst, to immediately decide upon malicious intent on the part of developers and publishers without applying any form of critical thinking to a situation. And I myself know this very well because I have fallen into that particular trap time and time again. And when I look at all of this, I see nothing but knee-jerk reactions on all sides. On the part of games journalists, gamers are labeled as entitled and looked down upon. On the part of fellow YouTubers like Yongya, who did exactly what I've done numerous times myself in the past, fallen into the trap of assuming malicious intent without assigning any critical thought. And we also have the gamers who, let's face it, some of them have been coming at this from a very emotional place and might not have had all of the facts at their disposal. And this is where channels like mine and Yongya's are supposed to come in, and it's starting to seem like many YouTubers are potentially failing their audiences on this score. Now, I make no claim whatsoever as to what is actually going on. How could I without being ingrained in Blizzard and YouTube? For some of you, you may have heard me reference Hanlon's Razor in the past. If you're not aware of what that is, Hanlon's Razor is the quote, "Never attribute to malice that which can be adequately explained by stupidity." A good phrase to know and one well worth keeping in mind. Now, I want to apply a concept that combines Hanlon's Razor with another good term to be aware of, Occam's Razor. Put simply, Occam's Razor is the simplest explanation tends to be the correct one, or if you prefer the more complicated version that states, when faced with two opposing explanations for the same set of evidence, our minds will naturally prefer the explanation that makes the fewest assumptions. Fewer assumptions means potentially a closer adherence to the facts. And so, bearing both of those principles in mind, I want to look at two specific scenarios with you all. The first is the video switcheroo that Blizzard has been accused of, and second, I want to talk about the downvote removals on the YouTube trailers. So, the video switcheroo. If you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, Blizzard has been accused of switching two different cinematic trailers, unlisting one and uploading a new one in its place. The assumption here is that this was done in order to offset some of the downvotes and negative critique of their game announcement. And when I went about verifying this, I found that they do have a public video on their YouTube channel, while a separate unlisted video is linked from the Blizzard launcher but is still viewable. Now, I have a bit of a problem with this scenario where people are claiming that they did this to downplay the downvotes. And again, I'm willing to accept that I may be way off base here and I may very well have missed a key piece of information, but from everything I've seen, everything I've dug up online, all of my Google searching, I haven't found any evidence that this was what was done or that this was their actual intent. Everyone just assumes that this is what has been done. So as everyone is basing all of this on what appears to be an assumption, I want to posit an additional possibility for you. What if, and again, I have no evidence of this, just like we have no evidence that this was done maliciously, but I suspect that this was done for marketing reasons. Now, larger companies like Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, and Take-Two Interactive all rely on data metrics in a wide variety of ways. In fact, this is no different than other video games and games companies that use ad tracking software and analytics. A Red Shell would be an example of something like that when they inject some form of ad tracking directly into a game. This would be a much more subtle form directly tied to their advertising only. When they spend money on ad campaigns, they want to know what is driving traffic, where that traffic is coming from, and how effective their marketing is, so they can adjust funding and maximize their potential reach. Now, so far, all we've seen evidence of is that the video from the Blizzard launcher is unlisted, or put simply, kept separate from public advertisements and ad campaigns. Now, there are reasons here, as they would want to know, first off, how well their follow-through is on the video from the Blizzard launcher itself, and second, keeping that traffic separate so they'll be able to better determine a host of other metrics external to their launcher. Put simply, I suspect that these two videos were always posted in this manner, keeping the launcher video unlisted so as to be able to separate the traffic and analytics. And as to why I think this is infinitely more likely, I'll roll that into the final reasoning after we talk about our second main point, the downvote removals. Now, we've seen plenty of evidence of this happening. I'm not denying it. Hell, I've seen it with my own eyes and screen captured it myself and posted it on Twitter. In YongYa's video, he also outlined very well that downvotes are disappearing. This is indisputable fact. It cannot be denied. But why? Why are downvotes disappearing? And more importantly, how are they disappearing? I know a lot of people will automatically say to make the outrage seem less prevalent. They're hiding from criticism. Those downvote removals are a form of censorship. And if Blizzard were directly doing that, I would completely agree with you. But that doesn't explain how or why. Now let's really think about this for a moment. Now, YongYa has a channel much larger than my own, and more power to him, but even he admitted that he had no idea how Blizzard could be doing this. Because both me and YongYa are very aware that, as YouTubers, there is no way for us to control those likes and dislikes on our videos. If a viewer dislikes our video, there's not a damn thing in the world that we can do to remove that dislike, and yet dislikes are disappearing. And I know some people will say, well, maybe Blizzard, as a corporation, has channels at YouTube that allows them control that YouTubers simply don't have. All right, let's roll that around for a minute. Blizzard is a large AAA that is getting downvote blasted. People assume that Blizzard is doing this, but what about the other AAAs that have gotten downvote blasted in the past? I mean, Blizzard is not the only AAA company out there. If Blizzard had access to this sort of tool, it would be reasonable to assume that Electronic Arts, Take-Two Interactive, and any of the other larger corporations out there would also have this form of access. So what about the Battlefield V or 5 or whatever trailer? It ended up with nearly 500,000 downvotes. Do you really think that a company like Electronic Arts, if they had the capability to remove some of those dislikes in order to change the optics, that they would refrain from doing so? What about the Call of Duty Infinite Warfare trailer that is currently sitting at 593,000 upvotes to a chilling 3.7 million downvotes? That's Activision. Do you think that Activision would have refrained from fudging the numbers on one of their hallmark franchises, but would be more than willing to do so with some mobile game? And why? What would they gain? From YongYa's video, the amount of downvotes versus likes would change the ratio by single-digit percentage points. Not exactly a very good masking of the outrage if they changed their like percentage from 3.3% all the way up to a whopping 5% now, would it? To be frank, I put nothing past AAAs when it comes to their protecting their pocketbooks. We've had them all lie to us often enough in order for us to ever take them at their word ever again, but this just strikes of outrage being fueled by nothing more than circumstance. Now let's take a look at the platform these videos are on for a moment. This is YouTube after all, not the most sterling reputation of stability there is there. In addition to that, there's a few things that most people aren't necessarily aware of. Now first, it's the fact that YouTube is always mucking about with its systems, changing how the system counts valid views, mucking about with the algorithms, and all sorts of nonsense. The platform itself is, from all appearances, on the verge of flying apart due to the constant changes being made, being barely held together by duct tape, spit, some baling twine, and a lot of hope. And then we add on to that the complications surrounding Google+. Now again, not very many people are aware that Google+ is mostly being shut down. Even well less known is that when Google took over YouTube, they required that Google+'s hooks be integrated into every single facet of YouTube. And now YouTube is having to go through the laborious process of removing those Google+ hooks from the site. And as a result, stuff just breaks. We've been seeing it for weeks. So we have an unstable platform that nobody really understands how its backend works, that is also in a constant state of upheaval and change, being broken by removing elements that have been fully integrated into the site, hosting these videos that are having downvotes disappear from that no other YouTube channel on planet Earth has the ability to remove. Also, from everything I've been seeing, it would appear that a lot of people are visiting all of the videos from other countries just to downvote them. So here's what I suspect is happening, especially for those of my viewers that stated their own downvotes disappeared multiple times. I suspect what is really going on here is YouTube is doing what YouTube does best: break in one area and then compound that break by a completely separate component actually working as intended. Because there are a lot of algorithms and components that YouTube implements in order to try to retain accurate data. Views are only counted based on certain metrics, and one of the most important being total view time matched up with percentages of the video viewed. Another algorithm is designed to combat like and dislike botting, to where the system only counts likes or dislikes based on a certain amount of view time versus percentage of video watched, just like they do with their view analytics. Now, I suspect that right now a lot of downvotes are being removed due to those watch time algorithms and a host of other factors. So we have two scenarios for each of these situations to consider. The first is that Blizzard did pull a switcheroo on the video in order to contain the outrage and has further compounded that by deleting downvotes from these videos. The other is that this is just due to simple analytics and ad tracking. or it's also due to YouTube being YouTube. But let's look at all of this through Hanlon's razor and Occam's razor. The first, focusing on the assumption of malice. The second, to avoid assumptions where the simpler solution might be more accurate. To combine those then, never assume malicious intent where a more rational and simple explanation will suffice, or what we can now call Sid's razor, because I wanted to name something after me, so sue me. So looking at all of this through Sid's razor, which do you think more likely for our first topic, the two videos? Do you think it more likely that Blizzard attempted to avoid the outrage by posting a video only to later mark it unlisted and post a new public video in its place, only to then leave the original unlisted video tied to their Blizzard launcher and advertise its presence, virtually negating the effectiveness of the attempt? Or do you think it more likely they had two videos to begin with because advertising is a thing and analytics tracking for a large corporation is also a thing? What about the second topic? Do you think it likely that Blizzard Entertainment gained some magical power to remove downvotes that no other YouTuber or AAA publisher or developer seems to possess, that it then used to remove an ineffectual percentage of the downvotes in order to somehow disarm or lessen the outrage from the fans? Or is it possible that maybe, just maybe, YouTube has been pulling a YouTube and Blizzard does not possess this capability that no other entity on the planet outside of YouTube seems to possess? Which is more likely? You see, I don't mind bashing on a AAA. I think it's quite well known that the consumer comes first in my eyes, and I'm more than willing and capable of holding developers and publishers' collective feet to the fire when it's called for. But that's the key right there, when it's called for. And when I look at all of this, I'm reminded of yet another quote that I would like to share with all of you from a certain somebody named Friedrich Nietzsche. Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you. The reason why I think that this is pertinent is because that simple a phrase carries with it a lot of meaning in this situation, the most prevalent of which basically means be careful you don't become the very thing you fight against. Now, a lot of channels like Yaz and mine battle constantly against the excesses of the industry. It's easy after a time to begin to expect malice around every corner from games publishers and developers because it is seen so very often. But when we come to expect it, when that becomes the normal state of being and the normal state of thought, we will begin to see it even when it isn't there. We will begin to ignore other factors that don't fit that idea of malice because by that point, one's mind is trained to be certain that it is there. And once that point is reached, without even knowing it, we have, to some extent, become the malice we thought we were fighting against. Railing against shadows, thinking ourselves moral and just when in fact we've slowly become the monsters we thought we were fighting against. So, to borrow a question from a certain beautifully brilliant British man that's no longer with us, we're here to ask and answer one simple question. And here, the question is it malice or is it circumstances seen as malice? Now, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Now, thank you so much for watching. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha, and I'll see you next time.